my name is Brigitte Kaiser and I am the founder of the Earth Custodians movement. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing to our channel.
Do you ever feel lonely? Well, you're not alone. A new study from Cigna says most Americans feel lonely, and the group most at risk isn't the older generation, it is one of the youngest. Researchers found loneliness is a major threat to Americans' mental, physical, and emotional well-being, and it can have huge consequences.
It is time to quit thinking about suicide as individual acts and begin thinking about the health of the human race. The latter is directly linked to its economic premise. It took way too long for this grim assessment to make the headlines, but now it is just another fact right in our faces. The humans were given the dominion over nature to precisely have the choice to escape animal predatory behaviors. But by choosing to behave like animals, competition, we have allowed our very choice to become our curse. Our species is now in self-destruction mode.
So, certain demographics in the study were worse off than others. Generation Z, which is adults between the ages of 18 and 22, were the loneliest generation. Why would that be? That seems to be sort of the prime of your life.
We looked across all generations, and you're right. As you said, we were very intrigued to find that the youngest generation of 18 to 20-year-olds actually felt the most lonely. And in addition, they also felt that their health was worse than older generations. We can't really point to any causation from this.
As a matter of fact, the data is so staggering that a few days ago the World Health Organization stepped in and claimed that the suicide rate was down 30% worldwide because the demographic index was never adjusted since 1999. How could this be possible that so many independent studies, along with that the Global Economic Forum, completely discarded such an important factor? Unfortunately, other numbers are telling a very different story.
Always had a hankering after mind-changing chemicals. He has always desired to take holidays from himself. But and this is the most extraordinary fact of all, is that every naturally occurring stimulant, narcotic, sedative, or hallucinogen was discovered before the dawn of history. I don't think there is one single one of these naturally occurring ones which modern science has discovered. Modern science, of course, has discovered better ways of extracting the active principles from these drugs. And
well, according to the World Forum, a globalist groupthink, the world impact of loneliness is about $2.5 trillion. No doubt, pharmaceuticals are raking up billions of dollars as loneliness dramatically changes the emotional makeup of people affected by it. And that a dysfunctional cognitive state is at the core of so many physical ailments, as much as we all know that stress is a killer. Loneliness, cynically speaking, is even way more lucrative than cancer, whose costs are around $1.5 trillion today globally. Of course, now that loneliness is a gargantuan and silent epidemic, they finally realize that something must be done about it. This is just another perfect example as why capitalism cannot fix itself. As always, monetarism cannot be preventive, or it would self-sabotage. And each new crisis offers a new opportunity to extract more money creation from the system. Of course, when analyzing this epidemic, the success of social media is no longer surprising anymore. They literally help make a killing.
substances. This is really very extraordinary, that a number of these new mind-changing substances can produce enormous revolutions within the mental side of our being, and yet do almost nothing to the physiological side. I mean, you can have an enormous revolution, for example, with LSD-25 or with the newly synthesized drug psilocybin, which is the active principle of the Mexican sacred mushroom. You can have this enormous mental revolution with no more physiological revolution than you would get from drinking too.
Not that many people can afford to help their parents anymore. Elderly are too left struggling with the loss of purchasing power as their relatives are saddled with debts. Since 70% of households go paycheck to paycheck, parents are emotionally absent and cannot pay enough attention to their own families and even kids. This is one of the major underlying causes explaining as why loneliness affects so many young people nowadays. Very heavy users of social media have a loneliness score of 43.5. We definitely cannot trust appearances anymore. Many will rather watch sport or a movie to forget about their stressful lives and loneliness. Loneliness is an alarming transgenerational and absolutely raceless phenomenon. Think about it. Because of money, we cannot even speak our hearts, or we lose our jobs or friends. It has always been so. So how can we ever expect transparency to win over? Forget about it. Yes, it took 4,000 years to get where we are, for the aftermath to become obvious to all. The clock is ticking. Do you hear it?
Most of us here in the West don't give a second thought to where our clothes come from. And I'm not even talking about sweatshops in Bangladesh. I'm talking about cotton. See, clothing consumes 60% of the world's cotton production, and European and North American shoppers account for 75% of cotton imports. And these farmers can barely cover their living costs with the rising price of pesticides and GMO seeds, which make up 95% of cotton farming in the country. Every year, farmers are forced to repurchase seeds for the annual crop season. What people in the world rely on, there's a silent tragedy that has already cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Since 1995 alone, over 270,000 cotton farmers in India have committed suicide.
It is the lack of belonging to a community which is the prime cause of loneliness. But competition induces individualism.
It's famous for its youth culture and wacky pop videos. In the land of K-pop and the economic miracle, making it to the top is a national obsession. But there's a flip side to all this fun. Students are coached to the point of exhaustion.
그냥 제가 없어요. 제 자신이 있는.
In Asian countries, China especially, there is another scenario playing out among others, and which is quite telling. People leave their villages to move to the city where they hope to make tons of money, but the dream so rarely comes true that the elderly lose all the family supports they once had in the village. Each culture shares the same aftermath in the end, even though the storyline is different. Young Asians migrating to cities inexorably become victims of loneliness as their family bonds erode over time. What is important to understand is that our today debt system was bound to come into existence as it is the direct and inherent consequence of chasing profits. It is the very logical evolution of the notes of credit started at the time of the European Crusades already, centuries ago. Actually, we can even go much further back in China, the Song Dynasty, which issued the first banknotes in 1023 AD.
A great deal of control could be used by, not through terror, but through making life seem much more enjoyable than it normally does. Enjoyable to the point where, as I've said before, human beings come to love a state of things which by any reasonable and decent human standard they ought not to love. And this, I think, is perfectly possible.
Psychologists and psychiatrists are ultimately rambling in the wind as they only focus on the symptoms while knowing about genetic memories, fueling anxiety and loneliness. Let alone the economists. They are not going to tell us that competition is hazardous to humans. These people are always quick to state that they need more data to look at this stuff. Just bear in mind that they earn six-figure salaries and want to keep their jobs.
More profoundly about the problems which may arise in relation to these new techniques which may contribute to this ultimate revolution. Our business is to, first of all, as I say, to be aware of what is happening, then to use our imaginations to see what might happen, how this might be abused, and then, if possible, to see that the enormous powers which we now possess, thanks to these scientific and technological advances, shall be used for the benefit of human beings and not for their ultimate degradation. Thank you.
We hear about basic income everywhere, right? But what and who will define the right amount of money needed to go by when so many already foresee the abrupt end of the capitalist era? Anxiety and depression are going to stay with us for a long while, unless we embrace a money-free society.